morning, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. We have our usuals here, Phil. Hello, Phil, Jez, and Nick. Today's subject is actually quite an important subject. And what we're looking at is that Krista, marketing director for the team, came up with the title, and her background also happens to be in teaching. And what she was talking about is that we're all kids inside, and that one of the strategies that organizations should be looking at is engaging teams in active learning. Right? And I think that's a very interesting subject. It's also a very controversial subject, the idea that play, which is active by essence, versus traditional methods of training, can have greater benefits than the traditional methods. It's almost, it's not common sense that play equals learning. So in doing that, one of the things that we're quite passionate about the team is that we're interested in the way that simulations, which are games in which teams of people play, bring real benefits to teams and to organizations and to leaders. So in that way, I'd like you guys to kick off thinking about actually the way the play is stereotyped within organizations as being bad, as being something kids do, which is, you can almost look at the video games world as having that series of stereotypes. You can remember playing video games is bad for your education, towards now simulations in the medical industry, in the aviation industry, and military, where teams of people and leaders are playing and it brings real-time benefits. So which one of you lovely people would like to kick this off?
Well, I would say that it does depend on the relevance of the simulation or game for what it is you're trying to do, right? So if, for example, like you just said something there, which was, it's probably not encouraged that kids just play games. It doesn't help their education. But that makes sense to me in a lot of ways if they're playing Candy Crush or, I don't know, some kind of more of a childish game versus playing a flight simulator, where there's a different set of skills that are required. And I think it just depends on the game. So if you have a game which is relevant to the type of learning you want people to use in their everyday job, then I see it as being better.
So is Tetris me, a bad game?
I love Tetris. Everyone loves Tetris, and everyone, loves Candy Crush and stuff like that. And there is an element, you could argue, to say that there is an element of problem solving, there is mapping, there is pressure, you're under time constraints and all these sorts of things to do well. And there is progression through the game, and so which motivates you. So there's lots of things that actually those games do, some better than others. But if you then, it's very hard for you to compare that to, like I say, like a flight simulator or something like that, where it's actually very technical. You've got to be very patient. It's then going to be very relevant to if you want to become a pilot, or if you're an F1 driver. They proved it with the Nissan game, didn't they? Can't remember what that was. It was a Gran Turismo, right? Yeah, that took people out of gaming and put them in real life cars. So for me, it just depends. But I would definitely say that there is a kid inside all of us, and we much prefer to play games to learn than we do to be taught in a schoolroom environment. But practicals versus theory, right?
I think that's
practicals are always much more fun than someone talking to you.
Right. I mean, if you take it back to developmental psychology, all right, and you take it back to Piaget, who was one of the biggest influences. What he said was that we all learn as children the rules of culture and how to function through play. because the children have to learn the rules of the games and how people interact. So it's actually learning a set of rules by which you're going to interact with experience. It's interesting that you just said that they took the lads from the esport game in driving and put them into real cars, and they were really good. I think I can't remember which county in the UK it is, but they actually train the police drivers on the esport machines, right, to get them to understand the difficulties, and it's now recognized as a training device for qualifying for police drivers.
Amazing.
And I think on the one hand, in the medical industry, for example, all right, doing simulation work specifically in that has grown into a multi-billion-dollar business over the last 10 years. But one of the areas I think is weak in generally in business is the use of simulations and play. That it has a bad smell about it. That if you talk at board level or executive level, that you're gonna, it's the reason why we can't say games. We use the word simulations because it evokes play. And the minute you say that, people are out the door as fast as you.
We're happy with the word teamwork, but not with the word game, right? So it's, but I think that goes. I actually think it comes from. I don't think that people believe that active learning nowadays is a bad thing. If you go back, 20, 30 years, schools were, this is the way we do it, copying down from the blackboards, that kind of stuff. I think in today's world, for our kids, we see and feel and want them to have a more active and engaging learning style. I think the actual business problem for this comes to our mentality about work and the ethics of work. I think it actually comes down to we've been for so long, and yes, it's changed over the last few years, but so long looking at the 9 to 5, and I pay you to do a job, or someone pays you to do something between them hours of time, and therefore we're paying for time. So the minute you say to an organisation, well, if you want to train and learn and develop your people, which they all think, yes, we need to do in order to get more productivity, more efficiency, well, in order to do that, you've got to let them play. You're paying for people to play. You're paying for people to have fun. And I think it's a mental shift in our workplace brains that goes, well, 1 minute, why am I paying that person all this money to go and play a game, to go and have fun, not realizing that actually the learning outcomes that come from that engagement is actually probably more valuable than the learning outcomes that come from them having someone come in and deliver a presentation. Or
But I just want to challenge that a second, right? Do you think that British Airways or other airlines feel disgruntled that they're paying their trainee pilots to fly a flight simulator?
No, but this is where the difference lies in, right?
But that's exactly my point.
Yeah, in a plane, they can't have their pilots crash a multi-million-pound plane 5, 6, 20, 50 times every year, right? So,
Okay.
an old friend of mine was a pilot, and he every single year they have to go and take these, simulation exams, essentially re-examination. He said they go in and essentially they'll be given a random situation. Sometimes it could be that everything actually goes fine, and they all think, oh, what's happened there? And they'll realize there was something they'd done wrong or something had happened without them realizing. But, you can't do that. I guess in business, can we fail multi-million-pound projects all the time? Probably not,
Well, they do.
So where do we? Well, they
That's
do.
the point. That statistic is still there. It's about 70% of programs and projects don't deliver.
Yeah,
they fail.
HS2 is a really good example of these
billions.
Every organisation I've worked, I always know that the first plan, the only thing I can guarantee about the plan and the delivery date is that both things will be wrong.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or at least one of them.
It's always like, it's why we went on to Agile, wasn't it? Because in a way, we had all this waterfall where you were being asked to predict what the future would look like. but actually you were like, we don't work like that anymore. And especially when you're like in our business where you're building things and data and technology, and you're building something, you're testing it, you're revising it, you're a new iteration of it, yeah, etc., etc., etc. Because we know that there's no point in just saying I'll do this and it'll be ready in 3 months, because I cannot predict what level of mess that there will be that I would uncover whilst I'm going through it. But one thing I was going to come back to, well, who made the rule? Someone obviously made the rule that business has to be a serious business. I talk about kind of like all my office experience where, it's like you're always, I don't
Because
know,
it's a religion
it never
thing.
felt like you could sit there and like laugh out loud and, do the conga around the office or
Culture,
whatever.
isn't it?
Everyone's,
It's
yeah,
the
culture, yeah.
culture. It's religion that's Protestant ethic, work ethic. All right, that play is where the devil comes in. Right, and it still exists, even though. But can I just bring back to Jez, well, to what all three of you just said there? Let's imagine, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about when we talk about the police or we're talking about aviation is hard skills to a certain extent, even though hard skills is an expertise, but it is a technical expertise when we're
The
talking
simulation
about,
is showing them the
yeah,
hard
all right,
skills of how to operate these
right.
systems, etc.
In medicine, more and more is this idea of teamwork and leadership, right, and training for that. Even to the point in operating theaters in the US, they've kind of modeled themselves on American football. They have a team coach because you've got a group of experts that at times hate each other working on a human body, right? Okay, and they all have egos, and the coach is there to manage the soft skills of the team. So let's imagine
That's a
if
scrum
the
master,
if
right?
the aircraft industry was crashing 70% plus, right, of their aircraft, which at the moment some of them are trying to bump into that recent thing. But if 70% were doing that, wouldn't you do something about it? Because it seems to me in our industry, all right, when we talk about education and soft skills, that there's somehow a blindness,
I think we
of,
do. Sorry, Toby, but I think
no,
from
no,
my experience, we do things to try and what we often fall down on is we always look at process, not people and skills.
All right. That's
So
what I
the
was going to say.
answer is always a process.
Yeah.
And from my experience, I've been a product owner, and I've had Scrum, and my entire time, I think I've said this before, was spent dealing with poor behaviours within teams. I mean that in the broadest sense. People not meeting their deadlines or people not communicating properly, and I would have to they have to put up the food chain, the decision making to me, because people couldn't make a decision. They were kind of arguing, and a lot of it always came down to me. It's actually just it was interpersonal skills and those soft skills that were kind of holding those teams back.
I think
That, that,
as an example, recently we've done one of the programs, one of the sessions, and one of the teams, without giving too much of the game away, they set their objectives.
you mean Nick on
On
our
playing sea change
simulation?
and song,
Yeah,
and yeah,
sea change simulation. Yeah.
and essentially the one of the teams, they'd been set an objective, or two, technically an objective had two parts for that particular session. And they actually worked very well as a team in terms of communicating, collaborating, looking at each other's skills and how they take things forward. But when the time pressure hit, all five of them were focused on one task, right? And in the game, what that really meant, or in the simulation, what that really meant is that only one of the characters was actually active at that time. And when we coached and went through it at the end, we kind of talked about how well they went against their objective. And we came to the realization that they had already halfway through that session decided they were only ever going to meet 50% of their objective. They completely forgot about the second part of the objective because they'd found maybe a path to the first objective. All focus, all energy was meeting that 50% of that objective. And I think to myself, we're in a situation, or we're in a classroom or a presentation or e-learning video. can you help a team come to the realization that subconsciously their ways of behaving have already made them fail? You know, and it was a moment to me of like, and obviously we do this quite often, so I'm used to seeing these moments. But it was just
Could
one of
you
those
just no, no,
to see that
don't lose that.
failure.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah. So the whole focus of the team during the simulation was to achieve one path they'd found to achieve part of their goal. Their goal had two parts. They still missed that part because they got to a blocker, but ultimately they had two parts of the objective. Halfway through the session, the team had subconsciously decided that they would only go after 50% of their objective.
So what you
And
were saying there was that
how
there's
do
a
how do you
fault
do that
line.
in a classroom? How do you do that
No,
on a
no,
piece
no,
of paper?
no.
Okay,
That's brilliant. Right?
I think we've
You
actually
know,
lost Toby.
they don't. They don't. They'd created an own goal. Their very behaviour was scoring an own goal.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? That's more importantly that what you were. Yes, you were making the difference between active and passive learning, but was the point that was interesting that I felt, and I may be wrong, was you were actually saying they were subconsciously doing something that ensured they failed.
Yeah, it's and like I said, the
without
minute
knowing it,
without
or
Yeah,
knowing
with
it.
knowing it,
yeah.
Well,
without
for,
knowing
for
it.
for them at the time, they were excited and energized and collaborating and working as a brilliant team towards that other part of the objective. They were all focused on that part of the objective, and it so from internal at that moment, you feel as if you're making progress. You feel as if you're being successful, right? And I think that the lesson comes in the coaching afterwards of having done that immersive, engaging, experience, self-awareness. And I just don't think that in a passive learning environment we gain self-awareness. Okay, we might might sit in a presentation and someone says, oh, most teams do this, and you look at it and go, oh, actually maybe we do that. But that's
So
as far as it
so
lives,
what
right?
so what I mean, what is classically known, right, within a pedagogical construction of training environments is that active learning is superior to passive learning, right? And yet somehow, and that there's this standard pedagogical triangle it's been going on for ages. I don't want to bore you with all the names of these, but that's there. But yet, nevertheless, right, this concept of active has been reduced to you read something, watch a video, do a quiz, and that's it.
But that's passive though, isn't it, Toby? That's not active.
Yeah, I agree with you. But if you go to any organization,
The
so for
fact you're
example,
taking a quiz, they think it's active.
thank you, and I have stand-up arguments, right? Because there's so much research. There's 2 days after you've completed that, everything that they've gone through is gone. It's disappeared. All right. It's one of the
Yeah.
things that universities are really trying to work with. Is typically back in the day, you did university, did your stuff, did your exams. 2 years after university, whatever you learned at university disappeared, unless it was a professional qualification leading to something where you continue using it. Well,
Yeah, this is
sorry, Phil, go
sorry,
on.
I was going to say this is one of my biggest bugbears in businesses is you call them the LMS, learning management systems. You know, the ones that
Yep.
the
Yeah.
organisations buy. Is we used to do, and this will be familiar across our industry and for all industry. We used to do a load of work on cyber attacks and phishing emails. Yeah.
Yep.
And we would do every year we'd have a big campaign, and you'd go on and you'd watch these videos and you'd fill the quiz in, and every year someone would make a huge error on a phishing email. And I'm being generous on how every year, because it happened more frequently than that. And all the evidence we always came back was that they're learning nothing from doing that. It's not embedded in the culture of the organisation. They learn nothing from those the video tutorials on how to do it. But the challenge back is it's cheap doing it that way. So it's actually cheaper. So, but it's not. Sorry, Nick. I was going to say, and my argument back was that it's not cheaper because when the error occurs, it's hugely expensive for the organisation. as economically and reputationally to do something about it, but actually you're not willing to invest in the training in a way which is much more understanding, embedding in the organization within people why it's important to make sure that you do these, have the correct hygiene around cyber threats and emails, etc. Sorry, Nick.
But no, I was just going to say, I think there's a slightly different element in that there is a obligation, legal, or let's say industry checkbox that has to happen, right? So, we were talking about this with one of our data professionals in a project a couple of weeks ago now, in that he said he just joined his organization. He's going through almost a week's worth of all of the e-learning that he needed to do, some of which are topics that he probably knows more about than the people currently in the business, because that's why he's joining the business. And he's had to do 5, 6, 7, 8, 10th number of times, and they're all the same. So he was talking about, why can't there be a centralized, like GDPR, course info system that if you've done it once in the past X amount of years, it's fine, whatever it may be. But I think there's a legal checkbox and protective checkbox that we have to do that says people have to do this every year. Would a simulation result in better learning for that? Probably, across a wider organization. Is it something that we don't want to spend money on there?
I think it's because I having been there now, I think from my experience, it may not be the same for all organizations, is once this happens and you go to your insurer, because you can have this
provide annual training?
Yeah, did you provide that? They'll ask you immediately, did you provide annual training? Then that's so basically you've ticked that box, and it's ridiculous. The whole circular piece of it is ridiculous.
But when your HS2 program's delayed by 5, 10 years, whatever it may be, there's no insurer saying, "Oh, by the way, did you train everyone on
yeah,
how to project manage properly?" Right?
No, exactly. So to kind of tilt slightly around the inner child bit, I've been reading this book by he's a guy that set up a really famous marketing agency in the UK called John Hegarty, and he's written this really interesting book around I can't remember what it's actually called. I think it's just called Hegarty on Advertising. But anyway, he was talking about how creative industries work, and I've never really worked in a creative industry, so I don't know, but my caricature of a creative industry is that you'd walk into their office and they'd have pool tables and kind of make your own shake bar and a flume that you travel from one top floor to the other, and and it would be all like comfy chairs everywhere, and they'd all be playing pool and stuff, and they're all looking really cool hipsters. And he was basically saying the way that he runs his organization is on, and I'm not suggesting this is for everyone, but chaotic creativity. And he's saying he has a very flat structure, minimum amount of meetings, and then that everyone has at any time the opportunity to kind of be creative. He's saying all around the walls there's people writing stuff and everything, because he was saying what failed for him was he'd have these, right, we've got this marketing campaign, we've got this new game called Sonk, we're all going to sit in a room, we're going to brainstorm, and at the end of it we're going to come out in an hour's time with the marketing campaign for it. And he was like, creative people don't work like that. You'll get the inspiration running around the park, or you get the inspiration in the shower, or you get the inspiration playing pool with your mate. So he was much more about how do you create that inner play, that inner child? How do you create that environment where it's kind of looser, where you can kind of do more? And I thought that's really in the industries that I ever worked, I can't really see that, but there is an element to me about if you loosen things up and you're encouraged to be a bit more like that, would that enable you as a business to solve problems quicker, to culturally get on better, be more performative?
It probably would, Phil, but then it go back to Nick's point, and the board doesn't like the thought of people not doing their 9 to 5 task list.
Oh, but if I want to respond to an email at 7 o'clock, that's perfectly fine. It's that productivity mentality. But it's quite interesting, Phil. Like I kind of think if you took these office blocks and pieces like that, if you put a slide in with a sign saying it's okay to have fun, how many people would take the slide rather than take the lift? You know,
Everyone.
it's true. This is what
If you
we're
were
saying.
able, everyone would do that.
On the flip side of things, can you imagine your 1.5, 2-year-old child giving them their first I spot the dog book, put it down in front of them, leave them for an hour, and at the end saying, I'm going to come back and quiz you on spotting the dog and what words you know. You know, this is the thing. We grow up with you know, or as parents and as you know, kids, we learn through play. From a very, very young age, we learn through play. We then go into a school system, particularly here in the UK, and okay, yeah, it's been shifting over the last few years, but we're going to a school system that was, you know, tracked against certain metrics of performance and rankings and leadership tables that meant you get taught how to revise, you get taught how to remember what's in a textbook, you know, that's relevant stuff. Again, there has been a huge shift if you look at the paths of STEM learning and some of the engagements in classes and stuff like that. But
not much of a shift then, Nick, unfortunately.
no, but it's
I
a
think
slow
I agree.
industry,
There is
right?
a
To say,
shift.
hardly
Look,
at all.
I'll tell you what. Look at the talking about aviation. Look at the whole safety briefing, right? Lots of people have heard hundreds of thousands, or hundreds, maybe not thousands, like I don't know, 20, 30 safety briefings in the course of their life. Okay, maybe for some people it's brand new, maybe some people they've only heard it once or twice, but people know it, right? It took actually social media and stuff like that for people to start posting these random, funny, odd ones come out. And now every single year, you know, BA, all the big airlines pay for someone creative to come up with a way of giving the relevant information in a fun, comedic way to make sure that people pay attention and people listen. And I think it's that kind of, like I said, we are kids, right? We hold on to our childhood, and we always memorize about it or remember about it. And part of that's an escape, I think, from the pressures and stresses of life and work and stuff like that. So why not relieve some of that pressure?
No, but sorry, Jess.
Sorry, Hope.
No.
There is. You also have to understand there is a period in time of our life where everything gets serious and sensible. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we've all been through that curve, right? So you're a kid, you're playing toys, having fun, hit school, oh shit, starts to get a little bit more serious. You're constantly told by your parents when you go out into the big wide world to be sensible, how you conduct yourself with others, all this sort of stuff is going on, right? Psychologically, you go from fun to things are getting more serious. And then you get you get to your first job, you get your first property, you start paying for your first set of bills, you start feeling pressure and stresses from outside. You know, there is a period in time, probably I would say between the age of about 18, where 50% is probably going out with your mates having fun socially, the other 50% is work and you're trying to pay the rent. And you go through that, and then you're on this career path, and then you're buying a house, then you're having children if you're starting a family, and all of that sort of stuff. And those pressures in life, that ain't all fun. So, and then I think when you get a bit older and you've done quite a lot of that stuff, I want to have more fun now. So, is there, and I just looking at this stuff from a different angle, maybe, is there a peak point where you can tap into play and playing to learn and fun to learn more than other periods in your life? For example, most boards are typically older in age, right? Most. If we're talking about like startups and stuff like that. Drop it down the section, directors, middle management, all that sort of stuff. I think we're getting younger, just as an observation in the main. Where's the sweet spot in, and the most effective time for effective active learning to take place? I'd actually say it probably starts the older people who want to have more fun, and it's harder to inject that into the 25, 30-year-olds who might think ain't doing it.
I would say that I recognise that picture that you painted, Jez. I would say I'm a big advocate for the fact that you still should encourage yourself and design into your life some element of play, even in that period where it's intense. Yeah, you may or
Mostly agree with you.
you may have kids as well. You're paying your mortgage. You've got all of that adult responsibility coming on to you. Yeah, and for others of us that have been big kids and childish, and I'll put myself in that for as long as you possibly could get away with it, it comes as kind of a big bit of a shock. I've always tried, I used to play Sunday league football. And then I go. I've got a group of mates now that I go out and I haven't got a broken leg. I go out on my mountain bike with, which allows me to have that element of play. And I do wonder whether, especially when a lot of us are working long hours, we're very stressed and all that, we're not considering that play element. We're not building that into
Mm.
our lifestyle
Yeah,
enough. You know what I
yeah,
mean? We haven't got that balance right. And I think, Jez, when we get a bit
absolutely.
older and maybe even a bit wiser, we look back and we kind of go, "Fuck it, enough's enough now. I want to have a bit of a break. I want a bit of a space
That's
in this
exactly
now.
what
I want a bit of
happens.
me." Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. That there is a disconnect between the workplace and the social life quite often, and now we're a little bit more savvy about what contributes to positive well-being. Positive well-being is around flexibility and play and fun and all that sort of stuff. It's why I love what we do with the simulation and the game, because actually I think it's starting to bridge that gap between, and I think that people are more productive when well-being is good and when there's flexibility. So
I think
I
there's
think
a
these things answer lots more questions than just
yeah.
we grow up as kids. I think there's timing. I think there's it facilitates the bringing together of the connection between work and social as well. So there's so many different things that are going on here. I
but you've got
find
to look
very
that
interesting.
we've had a shift in industrial focus, right? So and this is where agile comes through. As a big powerhouses of the world, we were manufacturing, and there's a piece around agile working that agile working is for complexities and unknowns. Whereas when you have a manufacturing process to build a Swiss watch, they very much know for many, many years how to build a very good watch and what they do. And it's a production line, right? And we have this efficiency cycle of this is a production, these are the steps. How do we make that more efficient? And you make that more efficient through more process, right? So through refining the process. So I think that's been in our world for a very long time. You then throw in the digital age and the booms and stuff like this, and all of a sudden you did have 20 years ago the likes of Silicon Valley's going, oh, 1 minute we're Google, we're A, B, and C, and we're going to throw slides and comfy chairs and this into the workplace,
Mhm.
and we're going to try and do agile working and take everyone in a different mindset. And there's lots of complexities and lots of unknowns. I think what we're getting to now is this convergence, right? The watch industry no longer can ignore the digital and tech industry. They have to change their thinking, their process. Manufacturing processes now need to adapt and change to meet the change in the landscape. So I think that mentality of 9 to 5, of paying for efficiency and process, has come from that industrial peak that we came out of. And therefore, in those scenarios, yes, it's not, you don't want them to active learn and have fun because that takes off the production line. What you want them to do is focus on what they've been told to do.
But there's a thing there where that, if you don't mind driving in there, is that people have been used as machinery.
Yeah.
Right? And that's, you're just a human being is a number. It's part of a machine. It's got a set of skills. Comes in, goes out, gets fired. Actually, what's happening is that as if you want, in your supply chain becomes commodified through technology, right? What the scenario that Phil described, where the creative, the innovative, the ideas, that's your competitive advantage, right? So there's a change in the model and therefore a change in the education pedagogy, which is to move away from people as machine parts, right? That basically reach a certain age and no longer required, which is, you get into your 40s and 50s in a corporate, you're gone, you're a waste of rations, right? To now where you actually want to talk about purpose, you want to talk about meaning, all right? And therefore, when we talk about play, which is the real essence of creativity, it's the real essence of innovation, which is where real problem solving and competitive advantage is born. There's a new area where our simulation, our work, allows people to evolve in that direction. I'm struck by a figure that blows my mind all the time every learn. It hasn't changed in 20, 30 years. It comes from Gallup, which looks at worldwide as well as by sector, the level of disengaged employees, right? And it cost the globe 8.8 trillion in lost productivity last year, right?
How do
How
they
can
measure
you-
that?
Are they? Well, you can go in, you can really see the level of, I use a French word there, the way of polling, right? So it's a very good question to ask. They talk about it. They've been doing it for years, so it's considered to be reliable statistics in terms of whether. But even if it was on semi-reliable,
Oh, it's still crazy, isn't it?
historically, it's catastrophic. But wait for this, right? Because it's in an article that I wrote last week. Do you know what the cost on leadership and teamwork training is? The training, it's going from, in 2022, right? It's $33 billion is the training marketplace, right? Around leadership and teamwork and stuff, rising in 2030 to $63 billion. And the biggest growth area is passive online material. So there's
What
So
is
it goes
it?
back to
yeah,
that
it's
Learning,
active and
just going to
passive piece, right?
continue.
learning
It's just,
material, you mean? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
One of the things, we were talking, we were going back just to bring it around the industrial age and our kind of model for how workplaces organize and structure themselves now is kind of this model we've had for sort of like 200 years, where we were making widgets, whether they were fidget spinners or Swiss watches, that's what we did. But actually, what we're discovering now is, and I never know how to describe them, but I'll do it this way: is we're more and more of us are knowledge workers. So we're employed for the kind of knowledge and skills that we bring, and then we're using that to kind of do things or make things or solve problems. Yeah. So we're not actually necessarily producing a real widget. We're employed because I'm a coder. I've got these knowledge. I've got these skills. I can use that. I'm a data scientist. I've got these knowledge. I've got these skills. I can do that. I'm a creative. So you've got all of this going on. Never been thought about how do you really manage and organize people of those skill sets. What does the modern workplace look like when you've got that type of worker and that relationship? How do they interact with each other? What are the skill sets? I think this is why we often then talk about we need all of those sort of soft skills for those workers, because of course what they're doing is they're communicating, they're being creative, they're solving problems, they're continually having to work with others all of the time. So we're then valuing those, but then we're not sure, well, how do you performance measure someone's job it is to be creative, come up with some solutions. Yeah, they don't
I've got
produce widgets
another.
at the end of the week. So how do you know? Sorry, Nick, and I say,
Yeah, go on.
how can I know that Phil's? Every time I look up, Phil is on the pool table or he's juggling in the corner, right? So, but his sales are up, and what he does is great. But what he's doing is that all day long. Do I score him down? Do I score him up? We're totally confused, I think, around how we want to see these workplaces work and operate.
I
I
agree
think
with that.
there's another simulation example you said there about the skills and how we pigeonhole ourselves. So in this particular session, it was one of their very first sessions, and the that everyone in the game has a different character with a different set of skills, and they've got a backstory, right? And everyone gets their little profile cards and profiles of who their character is. And this team spent pretty much most of their planning time reading out and telling each other, everyone, of all their skills they've got. And they hadn't at this point looked at anything else in the simulation environment. All they knew is their objective, and that for those that play this particular version of the game, the first stage is planning in a van, right? And all they knew is I told them they had to get out of the van. Get out of the van, yeah, just try something in a certain period of time. So because I'd given them that instruction, they were using their profile skills and what they kind of gathered about the game to understand who should get out of the van. And they were talking about all the skills they have, right? And when we came to the coaching session, I said to them, what happened during your planning time? Because you didn't seem to have enough of it. And they're like, oh, yeah, we found out what everyone's skills are. We found out what everyone does, what everyone's role is. I was like, brilliant. Okay. And I told them that, I'm the coach, and I said, I've been learning wakeboarding. I can do a few tricks now. I've been trying to learn the guitar. I can play a couple of songs now, and going through all these irrelevant skill set of who I am. And I said, what has any of that got to do with the objective you had? You had no idea what skills you needed to achieve your objective. So you spent loads of time talking about irrelevant stuff, which, don't get me wrong, building rapport and communication, those kind of discussions help. But you talk about, oh, I'm the data scientist and I can do this. Well, in this project, we need someone to cook an egg. Just because you're a data scientist, do you know how to cook an egg? I live the Shelwood life and I never had to cook my own eggs, so no, I don't know how to cook an egg. Oh, do you know how to cook an egg? Right. It's just because there's certain skills or things we need in projects that might not necessarily be someone's core skill set or their job title. And I think this comes down back to agile working, right? Agile working is there's a board up there with a task list. If you're not doing something and you've got the spare capacity, go and look at that task list, put your hand up and say, oh, by the way, I think I can do this one. And then someone will say to you, do you understand it enough? Is it very clear? Do you know what good looks like? Do you know what's acceptable to the project to get this completed? Do you need any support or help? No, I've got this one, I'm fine. Or actually, no, and you've told me now, I'm not too sure about that one. Maybe I'll take this one instead, right? Because we get this in a simulation as well. People go off on one part. They've got a task and they go off on their task and they hit a blocker. And when they hit that blocker, they're either shouting or telling to the rest of the team that they've got a blocker, and the rest of the team are expecting them to make progress. They're like, no, I've got a blocker, I've got this. Or they just sit there and they wait for the rest of the team to catch up to unblock their blocker. And it's like, you've just sat there while other people are doing something else task. What else productive could you be doing? So I think what you're saying there, Phil, is there's an element between how do we measure what tasks are productive? Them sat in that scenario waiting for people, are they being productive? But maybe they were reading through some documents. Maybe they were watching some of their other teammates to understand how they can improve what they're doing. How do we measure what is productive and productivity in a very complex world? And ultimately, that comes down to driving towards the objectives and the purpose. And did we achieve our business objectives?
I think the game is very good at highlighting some of that stuff. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, sorry, Jez, go on.
Go on, Phil.
I was just going to say, Nick, I completely agree with that, and I think this is for another whole podcast. My real bee in my bonnet is around how we reward performance in the workplace. It's often down to your skill set, yeah. So how well have you done as a data scientist is what you're rewarded on, not how well is you contributed to a team. What's your personality like? How did you get on with everyone? If you're lucky, sometimes there's a little bit element of that, but fun. So it can drive with the wrong people. Is I'm just paid to do my job. I get rewarded for doing this right. I don't get rewarded for getting up, Nick, and going to the scrum board and looking and doing something else for somebody else. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And I, not that I agree with that totally, and I think we should always looking for the team players. But I do think it comes down to structurally and culturally how we set things up in place.
That's a different podcast, right? Outside of how we learn, I think if we're all achieving one business objective, then why isn't there a shared objective reward? It's
you can assimilate a lot of this stuff. I can't. Phil, going back to your point when you were talking about the different types of people and what they do and how we how we encourage them and see what they're up to, right? If you imagine when you go and see a room full of toddlers, right? So let's just say there's 10 3-year-olds. Put them in a room, load of toys, some obstacles, some things for them to climb on, all that sort of stuff. They'll all go off in there and they'll do their thing. They'll go and play with whatever is of interest to them, right? Because that's their brain is just going, I like the look of that. I like that color. I want to play with that toy, right? And then what you see, if you observe, is, and I'm sure you have observed this at some point in your life, you'll see another child will be watching the other child doing stuff because they're more interested and they're really curious. They're more interested in what that person's doing, and they might go and investigate, and they might go and help or whatever, or they'll do something else. And then sometimes you'll see 4 kids over there, and then you get the one on his own, on or her own, whatever. This is, for me, no different to what we see in
I
the
agree
workplace
entirely.
today. But
Yeah.
we
That's
don't
learning
know
for engagement, right? That's learning for
what we try
engagement.
and do. Right, but what we do is we put them in, or have done in the past, much better these days, we put them in a square building with white desks and a black monitor and said, right, all crack on, and expect them all to perform the same.
Yeah,
They're not
and
going
then
to do that.
we make it all open plan, and then the noisy ones have to
right.
be quiet, and then
Yeah.
the quiet ones can't stand the noisy ones, and it's all.
Yeah.
There's no one else's computer to look at and go, oh, their computer's more fancy than mine. I want to go work on their computer.
Yeah, and you go back to
Depends how good
fun
you are
about
visualization,
what's fun.
right?
But what's fun in learning, right? What's fun in learning? That is not an environment to support learning if we're all big kids at heart.
Exactly.
You've got to get them out that space. And that's why I think that actually the remote working model, for many people, at least 50-60% of the whole workforce or human beings, I'm now in the environment I like right now. It's got all of the lovely things around me that I like. It's got some fun around me. Do what I want, blah, 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 blah. And as long as I get together with other people as well, I'm very, very relaxed and I'm very productive. Doesn't suit everybody, right? They might be one of those children that wants to be with the other 4 or 3 that I mentioned earlier. And that's why it's so important to
I do think when we come to active learning, we still need to ensure we inject variety, right? I mean, I've had people in our coaching sessions, in our training sessions, simulation sessions, who they're normally the biggest speakers in the room. They're normally really active, really engaged with the team. The minute you put them in a simulation, they shut up. They close in. It's not their thing, right? And that's nothing. I mean, some of them are actual gamers, but the minute they're in this kind of simulation with their teamwork and trying to have to work in a team in a different manner, particularly when they're under particular stresses from work and deadlines, because they are taking time out of their day, they don't engage with the value. I think you need to, in that learning development program, we need to realize that every single one of us learns differently. Every single one of us learns in using different methods and different approaches, and therefore your program of learning development needs to cover all bases. Now, that's not to say that every single element of that learning program can't be active.
But I
playing
think
a game is one way to be active. There are other ways to be active, right?
So as we start to bring things to a close, guys, I think one of the things that's evident from this is that this overly used word, but is really relevant now, is there's a paradigm shift in learning, right? What you talked about was, it's Dan Pink, who talks about, but you're talking about knowledge, where he talks about the creative class now, or the creative workforce, as we talked about the commodification of supply chains, right? So where are we going to be building new business models? Well, the new business model sounds to me like that it's a meta learning model change. So we're actually having to evolve from a traditional education system that was born to put people into industry, all right, and help people become parts of machines for as long as they like, to where creativity, innovation, problem solving, teamwork, and leadership are the new competitive advantage, and therefore result in having a new pedagogical model, which you're all in some ways referring to that it's both physical, it's environmental, as well as in some ways spiritual, all right, and emotional. It's hitting all of these buttons. And I think that in terms of the simulation that we're talking about, that we're heavily passionate about in terms of the sea change products and services that we put together, one characteristic is you're helping people step out of a comfort zone. Right? When you've just got a sea of conformity, which is what LMS systems basically have, etc., a simulation means that you go into something new. You're stepping out into something where there's risk, there's fear, and there's difference. But in entertaining that, in moving towards that, something starts to change with those people, because the simulation becomes a mirror, which is exactly what you were talking about there, Nick, that mirrors self-awareness and self-regulation, and you can see the gap between where you are and where you need to be. It doesn't mean that necessarily you get to where you need to be, but you can see the journey, and the coach is helping you in that journey. All right. So I think that you can see that in terms of ed tech, that there's a big revolution about to take place in active learning versus passive learning, and bringing this all together. So as we start to wrap this up, is there something you'd like to all leave us with, kind of summing up your feelings about this for the people that are listening and watching? Phil?
Yeah, I think the time we're all big kids inside. I think absolutely, and I think there is a place for play in your personal life and in your business life, and it's just let's not shy away from just why do we have to have businesses where you can't have fun? And I'm not being stupid about it. I'm not saying, we're all kind of running around all bloody day long having food fights or something. That's not what I'm suggesting. But, we gotta we gotta have a little bit more thought to how we kind of manage, run, learn in businesses. That includes a bit of fun and play.
Yep.
From me.
Jess?
And our lives, fun and play in our lives.
Absolutely.
I'm in Phil's camp on that one. I'm pleased. The quicker we adopt a newer way of learning, or really sort of, I think, look at the data that tells us that active learning is the way forward, the better, because I don't feel like, and I think it goes back to where the market is and everything else, and with this huge amount of change coming, which we've talked before on these podcasts, we won't be able to cope with it, and we won't be able to teach people at a fast enough rate. I think people learn a lot quicker through active learning, like we've all said. And if we make a bit of fun of it and we encourage that, then there'll be less fear as we go into that change as well. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to cope with if we're all working and behaving in that manner. So yeah, I just encourage everybody to keep raising awareness, and try and champion that in the businesses about, let's get some way of active learning into the company and encourage it moving forward.
Thank you, Jess. No?
I think for me, Jess's point about the journey and stuff like that is interesting. I think that I'm tired of these PowerPoint presentations sat in, like you said, in rows of desks. I've done that enough at school, copying off blackboards. I said, doing all this bits. Like, school was years of that. Don't, the minute you put me in an environment where I have to do that as part of my work day, you're just adding to the additional stresses and times, a bit like that. So you only have to look at the entertainment industry to know that we're all big kids inside, right? There's theatre, there's sports, there's gaming, there's adrenaline activities, there's environments we go out for dinner and the shows and all this kind of stuff, right? We crave entertainment, and why can we not incorporate that into learning, into our businesses, and in all make us all more engaged with the organizations we're with to learn and develop and be more productive through that side. So
let's not be lazy with our learning.
Yeah.
Get creative.
But I think what you're actually trying to do is to, as I bring things to a close here is to say that play is a competitive advantage. It's a missed opportunity, right? It's more effective than the traditional model. So, from a competitive point of view, it's a no-brainer. So I'd like to say thank you very much to our panel, to Phil, Magic, to Jez, thank you very much, to Nick. I have to say, just sitting here as a referee, really impressed. All right, really impressed at the subtlety in terms of parsing the difference between play, passiveness, and active learning. I say thank you very much to you guys for riffing on this. To people who are listening and to people who are watching, if you like this content, then please press like, and to really help us, please press subscribe. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers,
Guys, thank you very
Toby.
much,
Cheers
guys.
now.
Cheers,
Bye
guys.
now.
See you
Bye-bye.
later.